Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. We are very honored this morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you're tuned in, to be joined by the CEO of HapWare, Jack Walters. To set the stage for just 30 seconds, you contacted me many months back. I understand that you're actually an Aaron's Opinion fan. You're actually a listener of the podcast. I never would have known of you, never would have known of HapWare. But now that I have heard all the great stuff you're doing, I want you to walk through your life story. And, obviously, before you became a mechanical engineer and the CEO of HapWare, you started out as a Jack Walters. So who's Jack Walters? How did you get your life going in this whole direction of mechanical engineering? And then the other critical question that I want you to unfold in the hour conversation is, so for me, being blind, just like it is for you, being blind is not a problem. Why did you create a technology that will help us help blind people to understand the world in a non-visual context, if after all, it's okay to be blind? That's what I really want to know. Walk through the life story, just dig in. I'll mute the microphone and listen to you. Go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. And I'll start off just kind of from the beginning. I'm from Colorado, born in Texas, but raised in Colorado. Moved there when I was really, really young. And from a young age, I was always just infinitely curious about just everything going on. I would see something and I'd want to go play with it or break it or see or just go up and feel it, whatever it may be. As a young kid, I was super energetic, really into sports. Um, and that never really stopped. I've always been full of energy, super curious, loved connecting with people and just learning from different perspectives. And I had the privilege to grow up in a great area in Golden, Colorado, where Coors Light is brewed, if you're a Coors Light drinker. The cheap beer, but it's a good one. And it was like the heart of the outdoors. And I grew up in where one of the best engineering schools of the West happens to be, the Colorado School of Mines. And I never thought I would be an engineer. I never thought I would go to that school because it was so close to home. But, as fate had it, I was offered a scholarship to go there and actually play college football. So I ended up going to school mines on this, playing college football, started my degree as a mechanical engineer, and just immediately started building, learning things, talking to people. And one of the first things I built was one of those pirate porches. And it was for like when someone tries to steal your packages, it like blows up and like puts sparkles on them and has a siren going. Mark Rober, like the famous YouTuber, did it back in the day. And I was like, oh, I want to build something like that. And I did. And it kind of worked. And then the next year, um, I was like, okay, that was a fun project, but there's a lot of other things that, are fun projects that could be, you could build when you have a little bit of engineering background. And that kind of led me to the next thing that I built, which was a wearable for infants that would help track kind of premature illnesses, or early detection of illnesses. And that was a project. It was so challenging, but so much fun. And it kind of uncovered that, personally, I had the ability to kind of identify problems, but also sort of live through them by talking to people and having lived experience of ways to kind of create things that could be beneficial to humanity. And it wasn't until my senior year that I met Brian, who's my co-founder and our CTO, and he's lost his vision at the age of 18, and we were chatting about technology and we were building things with haptics. And he was talking about how challenging it was when he first graduated from college to get a job. And he's talked about the things of like, oh, I just going up to like at a job fair and knowing when to shake someone's hand or when they're walking away or when they're smiling or nodding or like look surprised by something you said. And that kind of sparked something in us that like, okay, you understand this. Is this something that a lot of other people have felt, have talked about? These nonverbal or visual cues are inaccessible to a lot of people, and what do those really mean? And they usually come in the most really critical times, or the most non-convenient times, like when you're like trying to get on a job interview, or when you want to connect with someone on a date, or you're trying to make new friends. And we went on and started talking to a lot of other people in the community, and a lot of other people in the community were saying the same thing. They're like, yeah, these things, for especially for Brian, said when he lost his sight, he was like, I remember being able to, have access to these, and now I don't, and then so on and so forth for other people that were in the community, and how, empowered it makes him feel to have access to these things. So after that, we're like, okay, it sounds like this is not just, something that Brian feels. Tons of hundreds and hundreds of other people we talked to feel the same way. And like I said, we were kind of collaborating on this research project about haptics, like the sense of touch. And from that, we kind of had a breakthrough where we could use a sense of touch to communicate just about anything and make it intuitive. And what I mean by that is that we could create these sense of touch sensations or haptic sensations on the arm, on the wrist, or on the back, wherever we wanted, that would recreate some sort of visual input. So for this case, it was okay, well, we know that these visual inputs about what people are doing are really, really important. So let's convert nonverbal cues, gestures, body language, expressions, motions, whatever it may be, into something people can feel. And the point of it being through the sense of touch is because it requires very minimal cognitive load and you can perceive the information passively. So we went on and we built this like crazy bionic arm. And it was like literally went up your whole entire like left arm. And it was a proof of concept, but when we did that, people were able to recognize these different cues that they hadn't been able to have access to before in real time and with only 2 minutes of training. And some of them were able to get it with absolutely no training. So they were able to put it on, feel the vibration, and they just knew it was someone trying to shake their hand, or they just knew it was someone turning away, or they just knew it was someone having their arms crossed or rolling their eyes, whatever it may be. And that was a little bit over a year ago. And since then, Brian and I decided to like, okay, let's let's spin this research project off. Let's start a business and let's try to make something that can impact, millions of people in the community because that's what it's about. It's about giving people, opportunity where it may not exist, giving people an equity of information and making things that are inaccessible accessible. And that kind of leads us to where we are now at HapWare, prototyping, pre-launch, doing a lot of beta testing, but with that mission in mind.
Absolutely fascinating. I got to say, this is really, really fascinating. So, if you don't mind me saying, so a little bit more about my background and why I'm so fixated by all this is so I was born blind. I'm 34 years old. I was born with glaucoma, by the way, and a congenital heart defect, by the way. And basically, from my childhood in the 90s, well, when I was a really little boy in the 90s, early 2000s, moving all the way up until now, I've always just kind of thought to some extent that although I do have usable vision, and although I've had many corneal transplants, I've always thought that the non-visual things that I'm not picking up on are things that I will never fully be able to understand because I was born a blind person. So really, what I'm really kind of wondering here is, A, for one thing, so were you also born blind? And the second point is, so how, really walk us through for me who wants to learn and for the listener who doesn't fully understand. What is mechanical engineering? What is haptics? And then how do you put them together to create a product? And how does haptics actually work as it relates to a product? And how would you describe the product if I'm holding it? What am I really experiencing? And of course, really, why on earth do I actually, and I know that I need this extra information. I'm certainly not debating it, but why do we really need this information? And one more thing, if people are born blind and they're not used to understanding non-visual information, how will your company and your product teach blind people how to understand the nuances of nonverbal communication? What do you really think?
Definitely. Yeah. So I'll just say, so for instance, like Brian, he's 100% blind. He's our lead technologist. Um, I'm sighted. So
Okay,
just,
great.
yeah, just as you asked if I was, um, about my vision,
Hmm.
and to kind of understand like what it feels like and what it actually is, and why people may want to care or just want to know about it. Um, over 50% over half of communication is nonverbal. And it's not just like the kind of facial expressions that people make. It's how people move, like in what's going on with their whole entire body. It's not just the face. And it can tell us a lot about what people are meaning, what their sentiment is, and then what's going on. So for like with our users that we have right now, they can use this in numerous different ways, depending on what they view as important. Whether it is knowing, who's in front of them and what they look like if they're in a group setting, or if they're on a one-on-one conversation. And, a lot of these nonverbal cues are indicative to just what someone is feeling. And that's exactly what we want to be able to help with. Bridge the gap of tone or just audio to sight and giving the equity of information that it can be really, really critical. And from the people that we work with, saying like how you have teachers, for instance, that were born blind, and they're saying I can connect with my students better. I know when they're raising their hand. I know when they're nodding in agreement. People's children that, if they're a blind parent, knowing what their kid looks like when they open up a Christmas present, for instance, we've had one of those. And also we've even had a really fun one or interesting one, which was he was a blind FBI interrogator. So just knowing the subtleties of these little facial expressions. So the point is that we can make this real, like it's almost customizable to what you think you might want. So for you, Aaron, it's just like, okay, well, like maybe I just want to know these three cues, and you can have those three cues. Or you were like, I want 50 of them, and then you can have all the ones you want. And we also getting to the point where we can read things that are more nuanced, like interest and comfort and engagement, um, even something like pain potentially. And then the wearable itself feels in kind of the new version that we're building like a watch, like an Apple Watch. It's a very small form factor, just like a 2-inch band, less than 2-inch band, and then a nice top that clasps on using magnetics, and then it just all kind of seamlessly puts on. And then you have these little kind of actuators that are around the band, little like vibration kind of motors, essentially like how your phone has like a vibration when you like text or get a notification, it makes that kind of buzz. But we're able to pinpoint them around the wrist. So you put these around the wrist, kind of in the whole circumference, and then you can kind of create these different sensations and patterns, combining intensity, rhythm, location, speed, so on and so forth, where you can actually almost paint the picture like what someone is doing on your wrist. So like a computer screen, for instance, there's thousands and thousands of pixels on it, right? What we're kind of doing is putting those pixels in a really tight form factor around your wrist and then almost drawing the sensations so that they kind of feel like the thing that someone is showing you. So whether that's, whatever, and it could be whatever you want it to be. Like that's one of the most important things is giving people customization, optionality, ability to choose and customize their experience so that, like you said, someone who, like you said, you were born blind, then, I don't know, you don't know what the visual cues are. But if you do want to try them, or you want to know when someone is walking away or when they're, I don't know, flipping you off, for instance, let's just get creative. Um, you can have access to it. And then to answer your other question, about what kind of mechanical engineering has to do with this, it really comes down to design. Like, like we've talked to so many people and we've tested with so many people, and aesthetics and comfort matter. Like, I think that, um, for lots and lots of times, people in the blind community have been used to technologies that are not aesthetic, don't look or feel good, aren't comfortable, aren't something that you can put on without drawing attention. And that's what we've been hearing over and over again. Is like you want to put something on, you almost forget that you have it on. And if it is visible, it's something that you want to be proud of, something that looks cool, something that's nice to feel. And that's exactly what we're building our wearable to feel like. It's something that is nice, it looks good, crisp colors, really, really, complimentary, and just feels like something that can give people a world-class experience and bridge the different communication gaps from just audio to visual as well.
Really excellent. Really, really well done answer. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, that definitely answers my question about that. So I guess, the other thing is, have have you spoken to other sighted people? I guess the other question of many that I would wonder is, so what would other sighted people think if they saw that blind people were perceiving their nonverbal communication? What research have you been doing about what the social effects of this technology will be? Certainly it's great technology. It's a good idea. It's the perfect idea, but it will have social impacts. So what are your predicted or your projected social impacts of this technology?
The main one I think here, the social impact, is going to be, and what we've measured is really an improved connection and an improved access and employment as well. So everything that we're building this for is to give people more opportunity in employment or in education or in that personal connection. We have people telling us how this is great for understanding emotions, connecting with others. There's a kind of a term in assistive technology of like independence and quality of life. Um, and that's what, technology is supposed to do now. It's supposed to enable people. It's supposed to improve, barriers or quality of life. And that's exactly what we have seen. We have seen people have like great, great experiences and testimonies around how this is improving things for them and situations and environments. And then when it comes to sighted people, like you said, one of the main things that this has been really helpful for, and this is something that is a demographic question about, in the blind and low vision community, there sometimes is other pairing disabilities, um, and also for just people who are sighted that are with disabilities, sometimes they can feel similar, you know, difficulties around social cues and nonverbals. For instance, people who are sighted but that are neurodiverse. They maybe just have a hard time interpreting people, what they're doing, what they mean. And there's a great opportunity for people with pairing disabilities or people who are sighted, but neurodiverse to get a better understanding of the people and the environment that they're interacting with. And then the last thing I think, what that does when you're building a technology that has that sort of impact is you can also create it to be more affordable. And I think that is another one that is always at the top of mind in the community is how do you make something that A is affordable, um, but B is really, really useful? Because the last thing you want is to build something for multiple demographics and it not be something that people can get access to because it has a $4,000 price point, like some of these, I don't know, like e-sights or, the old Envision glasses. There are thousands and thousands of dollars or other assistive technologies for mobility that can be really, really expensive. And I think that is the other great opportunity here is that when you're enabling things like employment and education and connection, you can help create better socioeconomic breakthroughs for the community.
Yeah, that is really important. And, I think as you continue to do more research and talk to more and more blind people, and hopefully, certainly, Aaron's opinion should not be the end of your podcasting experience. It should only be the beginning. In other words, there are many great podcasters like me who you should be talking to who will give you very, very different answers about this. But one thing that blind people overwhelmingly, and here comes a generalization, but it's partially true and partially a generalization. Blind people do, and I don't want to say take offense, but there is a situation where if technology is priced too high, blind people feel almost as if they are sort of excluded from having that opportunity just as much as they think it's too expensive. In other words, it kind of does affect the psyche of people when certain technology is too expensive. And so that's a very important point for you to consider socially. And then, of course, from a business perspective, well, I would wonder, well, how many units do you need to sell? And I have no idea. I'm sure you know the answer, but how many units will you need to sell to be able to break even or be able to make a profit, So that's a very complicated thing. The other thing is, I'm a bilingual English French guy. I forget if I said that in any of the emails, but I am. And so, nonverbal communication is actually different from language to language, culture to culture. So how are you going to include other cultures in this technology? In other words, maybe cultures from, Europe, Africa, Asia. What do you project as far as this device's, basically pliability globally when you're dealing with, multicultural communication?
I'm really glad you brought that up, Aaron, because it's absolutely right, right? Different people, different cultures, different countries have a completely different way of understanding communication, and especially the nonverbals. In Greece, I know that sometimes they nod their head up and down to mean no. And in America, and remember Western countries, that is a significant sign of yes. You nod your head in agreement, and you nod your head to say, yes, I agree, of some sorts. So what we've actually been able to do, and this is where we kind of get the excitement around the technology, is because we're not using a typical kind of chat GBT AI, convolutional neural network for any of my tech people out there. We're using a much more systematic computer vision approach. So without saying mumbo jumbo, essentially we look at landmarks. We look at these definitive truths of different points on people's body, face, and so on and so forth, but also use some AI to make quicker decisions and inferences. And through that, we're actually able to really customize these different things depending on the different ethnic and culture you're in. So one of the things that we're thinking about building in to our platform and into our customization is 4 different ethnic groups and different cultures. So you can go, all right, well, you're French, like you said, bilingual. If you go visit France, maybe you want the cues that are more relevant to when you're in France. And then you can just press a button, and then you have all these more cultural norms in France than when you were back in New York. So we're actually able to really adhere to these different cultural norms because we're not using sort of biased, one-timey AI models. We're able to use things based off landmarks and customize it and do this really, really quickly so that people can get that cultural kind of adaptability that's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Yeah, that's really, really deeply fascinating. Yeah. What about so let's go back stateside and let's say somebody's using your device in an interview setting, right? So that's now interviews for blind people. I can already tell you, based on the experiences I've had in my own life with interviews, and based on the plethora of YouTube videos that exist for anybody about interviews, interviews are a big problem for a lot of people. So I think that's actually the most pivotal and most vulnerable moment for a blind person is in a boardroom. It's always the most intimidating. So yeah, I mean, would this device be able to provide basically a haptic summary of a conversation? Let's say in other words, let's say that somebody's on a podcast like Aaron's Opinion and we talk for an hour, let's say. Would your device be able to provide basically a social summary of the nonverbal communication throughout a conversation?
Yeah. So we're actually creating, and we want to do some of this with our app, is kind of like a recap, right? Like you can go in onto our app, and then after you wore it for a day, or in the interview, you can be like, this is kind of what happened, and you totally get to understand that. But even more so than that, like which I think is one of the most empowering parts, um, and so we've been told, is when you're actually in the interview itself, and you want the cues right away. And that's where the real kind of empowerment comes from, is you get it right away, and it's completely discreet. So it's not like you're wearing a pair of just smart glasses that are talking to you and saying the person is smiling and nodding their head, and they just lean back and have their arms crossed. No, because you're getting it through haptics. You can get all that information discreetly, passively, and with full autonomy, meaning that like it doesn't take away from the moment. So you're getting these insights about what the person's doing, and you can receive it and continue what you're doing at hand. You can continue, answering the questions, you know, describing your background while receiving all that access to information while it's happening.
And exactly what would that feel like? So I have an Apple Watch right now. I'm wearing it. So what does it feel like? What does haptic feedback actually feel
Yeah,
like?
yeah. So imagine the person is smiling at you. And if you have your wrist, you can kind of go to like the side, one side to the other, and you can kind of like draw like a smiling face on it, right? That's almost what it feels like. It almost feels like a smiling back and forth on your wrist. And then from that, you'd be like, oh, this is someone smiling. And
Huh.
then when they have their arms crossed, maybe it feels like an X kind of going. It almost draws the arms crossed across your wrist. So you're like, okay, I just got that. I know from earlier that that's arms crossed. So now I know some person's arms crossed. And this all happens really, really quickly. Patterns last like less than 2 seconds or less than a second in many cases. So it really feels like what the visual side of it would be. So like you said, you were born blind, but if I told you to cross your arms, you know exactly what I meant. If you put one wrist over the other and you have your shoulders kind of drooped down and your arms are pretty much making an X. And then we kind of just draw that picture via haptics on your wrist all across the whole entire thing. So that's really what it feels like. It's really gentle, it's subtle, and doesn't make any noise. And it's something you can just feel, but it's a visual cue that you can feel.
Super cool. Super. That's that kind of boggles my mind. It really does. I mean, I have usable vision. I can see your face, like the room behind you a little bit, but the most important thing that I will tell you, or well, actually I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know if it's of any importance to you, but my opinion of it all is this. If you're going to talk to me about it, I will tell you that I will never, it's actually hard for me to express it to you. I will never be able to understand the same nonverbal things that you understood being born a sighted person. So, so the importance is, with these types of things, to make sure that when the blind person is using this great device, that the blind person actually understands what the social implication, right? So it might be really overly obvious, right? Right? Crossed arms means, well, many things, withholding information, nervousness, disagreement, unsure,
Or it could
nervousness,
just be the way someone rests, though,
or that.
right?
So I mean, I guess what I'm trying to unpeel, I guess, is so how would the blind person
Yeah, no, no,
you
no. I know what you're saying.
into like
So,
it's really hard to express it, but how
no,
would
I know
the
what you're
device
saying.
cross the bridge between intuition and haptics? Like how do you do it?
Right,
It's
right,
really
right. No, no.
cool. Yeah.
So this is, I think, one of the most important things, right? Like you said, you, you might not we perceive visual cues differently. But the main thing here is like everyone's always trying to say they're coming out with the next smart device, the next smart cane, the next smart, you know, wearable. But
Mhm.
really, the person is the smart device. And all we're doing is just giving people information. So that is really the difference. Is like it's contextual. Like an arms crossed, like you said, can mean 10 different things. It might just be the way that I feel comfortable holding myself. So all that's happening is really when we say someone's arms crossed is if that's what you want, we're just giving you information. And then you could be like, okay, well, this is a lighthearted conversation, but his arms are crossed. Okay. Or you can say, well, it wasn't a lighthearted conversation, his arms crossed. Now that gives me something else I need to know. So that is really what it is. We're just providing people with more information and then they can make decisions on those sorts of you know, calls, right? Like the person is the smart device. We're just giving people more information so that they can go on and create and to take different decisions.
Perfect. Understood. So it would be up to the blind person to interpret the nonverbal communication just as much as it's your job to interpret nonverbal communication from another sighted person.
Right.
That
We would
is,
tell you
yeah.
it. Yeah. So we just tell you arms crossed, but you gotta say, okay, what does this mean?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which is hard for everybody, but I think it's especially daunting for a blind person to try to interpret that and try to figure that all out. It's a very complicated thing. I mean, there's people, um, I mean, Brian has a PhD. I mean, there's people who have PhDs in this type of nonverbal communication. It's really hard to tell sometimes. And if you're really, really good at doing interviews or talking to people or having social conversations, you know how to stifle the nonverbal cues. So that's another weird thing too that people do is they're able to stifle certain behavior. But of course, it would be up to the blind person to really understand that and really think about that. Absolutely. Yeah. Really fascinating. Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and then, as far as, a product goes, when it really relates to, a prototype. So I guess if you were to walk through the ingredients of, taking an idea, which you have more than an idea, you have an amazing product, but taking an idea to a prototype, to a product, to a launch, and then, obviously the attorneys and the marketing and the finance, how does what's the whole, I guess, timeline for how these things actually play out?
Yeah. I mean, really, I think for what we're doing, it takes longer than anticipated. It's not like you just say, okay, I'm going to make a device that's going to communicate nonverbals to people and it's going to work amazingly. Um, there was a lot of back-end research, a lot of testing, and a lot of talking to humans, like about really like what matters. And I think that is, and especially in the assistive technology and wearable technology realm, is something that can't be ever misguided, or not misguided, but ever forgotten, right? Like in that capacity, you need to be constantly including people from the community in what you're building, right? You need to constantly be gathering feedback. You know, we made our first prototype, like I said, that was one of the most ridiculous things ever. It was a huge sleeve. But the point of that was, okay, before we spend more time going down this rabbit hole, we need to prove that haptics in the system is worth it, right? Like, is it worth going down this? And that's step one, make something super simple. Make something that is like, does not take much time. Like try to just make it instead of taking years or months, what can you make in like a week that would at least just prove that initial validation? And then, from there, it's okay, we proved a little bit of validation. How can we make it to adhere now to that feedback we got? They said this works, but XYZ, ABC. Okay, well, what can I do really simply, but include people in every step to make it just a little bit better? So this has been over the course of a year for us of just going down this, like making something, trying it, having people wear it, and then getting feedback and then saying, okay, we're going to make improvements now so that it really does kind of end up being something that is like the headphones you're wearing. They're good. They're really well made. They fit my head. They're cut. I can adjust them. But, I guarantee whoever, you got them from, let's say they're Bose, that they put it on 100 different people's heads of different sizes, shapes, and hair colors and whatnot to make sure that it actually was comfortable and it did its job. So it's the same exact thing as like when you're starting a product. It's like, and especially something that people interact with, by the touch and the feel and the experience. It's like you've got to include people all the time. And like, there's no point in us getting embarrassed by it because, the people that are testing it and the early adopters, that's the kind of the job of, us and them together is like, we're doing this thing together, and we want to have, critical feedback. We want to know like what works and what doesn't. And then when you kind of get to like the side of like, okay, how do you make the product into a business and actually say like, I have an idea, but how do I make it real? How do I impact millions of people? Um, well, it takes a plan and then it takes just a bunch of action and a bunch of trying things. Like, for instance, we were like, okay, we built something, but in order to get people to use it and get excitement and validate it, we need to put it in the hands of 40 people. How the hell are we going to go get 40 people to try this? Well, we can go and do outreach. We can go into local community groups. And that's exactly what we did. We were like, okay, let's like just email a bunch of people that we know, see if they know anyone that's like that we know that are blind, or if we don't know anyone that's blind, can we ask for connections to some people? Okay, and then that kind of lets, oh, there's like a bunch of these like local advocacy groups like the NFB or something or FFB, and then reach out to them. Hey, can we come by for like 10 minutes and demo this on like as many people? And then you go from there. And then, when you talk about marketing, it's okay. What do people resonate with? Where do people consume media and understanding? It's like, oh, well, like people are buying a little vision of podcasts, like what you're doing, or like Facebook groups, because, they can read and communicate in text and whatnot. Oh, well, these trade shows are actually really good because you can get really high foot traffic and, yell at someone and be like, hey, we're building something. You want to try it out? And then so on and so forth. And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, to do all this really, really exciting stuff, it takes a lot of money. And then you're like, okay, well, now we need to go find investors or someone that, can help finance this thing so we can build it and then make an opportunity around it that showcases like, hey, this is a problem. You've talked to a bunch of people. A bunch of people have, tested it and paid for it or whatever it is and said that like they want to use it. They want to try it, like yourself, Aaron. Um, how can we make this work? And then, you go down from there. And it really is just like putting something on a paper and is like just like the easiest part. And like the thing that I think catches a lot of people up is like you actually have to like be super action oriented and try like so many different things to get one milestone. And I think that's like the most important thing. It's like you just like can't stop trying and you have to keep putting different things from the paper that you made your plan with to see what actually works. Like that is one of the main things that we're constantly doing is like we have an idea of how to get awareness or learn or test something, but a lot of the time just that doesn't work. So we have to try something else and then keep going and going and going until we can say, okay, well, now we can tell a little bit about what we're doing, get feedback, have people join our wait list, by going on Aaron's podcast and having people that listen to him that want to try it out be able to reach out to us. Cool. That's something that we can do to help, get this into the access of people's hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We certainly have a global audience here at Aaron's Opinion. And I know other people around the blindness community so my academic background is a bachelor's in international relations. So I'm come from that section. I'm not an engineer, but I do know engineers who are blind and who I know many other people. Regardless, I know many people in the audience will be very, very fascinated and very eager to try such a thing. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what has been so far? What has been the greatest barrier your barrier you've had to overcome, specifically related to testing, right? When you're testing in a large group setting, how does that work, and what have been some of the challenges you've needed to overcome with that?
Yeah, I'd say it's funny you say that. Like right now, we're in like a crazy push because this month we're sending out like over 30 new pilot units, beta units to people from a bunch of updates from the months before. And, you know, one of the hardest things is actually implementing the feedback into actionable improvements in a quick turnaround that, adhere to like what people want. Like I said, like it's all about user feedback. But now, like when you have to go and engineer something to get that user feedback, like for instance, our last wearable, it was like a one size fits all, and it didn't quite do the function of one size fits all. So, okay, well now we have to engineer something that still has all the haptics integrated around it, but has a really easy adjustable while still maintaining like where certain things are supposed to go. So it's been hard for us to actually like try to keep functionality but improving form factor. And that is like just a trade-off of, like it's constant trade-offs with engineering. It's like you want to improve something by X%, um, but that X% improvement might decrease improvement on this end. So, kind of measure balancing those two things with the people, with the users that are actually like that this is intended for to say like, does that trade-off make sense? And that's exactly kind of what we're doing right now. And, we have this opportunity. We open it to like international, like worldwide. Like you said, you have an international audience. If people want to get involved, they can join our waitlist at hapware.com, just hapware.com/waitlist. And it's right there and they can get involved. And I urge anyone that wants to be part of it and part of our community in that sense to come in and join and like voice their opinion because it can't be done without the community. Like it's a community first approach. And the more people that we have on our wait list, the more people that go on our website and join, um, the greater, we can make the technology, the greater the potential impact is, the greater improvements we can have because we can get more and more understanding of like what it is and what trade-offs matter and like what should we keep as like the most empowering possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. How will the device be marketed? As in, exactly what are you what are you marketing the device as when it comes out? I understand what it is, but what is it going to be marketed as?
Yeah, I mean it's a device to help people in employment, in education, and in their personal life. It is meant to, improve communication, is meant to improve productivity in the way that you interact with others, and it's supposed to bridge all those gaps. So really what it's supposed to do is empower people by giving them an equity of information and giving access to things that were before not available. And that's exactly what we want it to be as, is to be marketed as and how people want to use it as well. Is something that they can use every day for hours a day or just in those critical environments when they're at a job interview or on a date so they can get access to all these important things.
Yeah, very good. So basically, it's marketed as a bridge between the blind person and obtaining employment through basically understanding the nonverbal communication. Right. Yeah, I think it's going to be really good for people in interview settings, is where I picture it. At least that's my opinion of it. I think it's going to be really good for blind people in an interview, especially, or education, or at home, really. But mostly in an interview, as I said, I think that interviews for blind people cause the most amount of stress and cause the most amount of social confusion. So yeah, that's really, really interesting. Um, Now, will this device eventually, pair with VoiceOver on the iPhone and on the Apple Watch and things? How will this complement and interact with VoiceOver?
Yeah, it's already completely compatible with VoiceOver. Brian actually built the whole interface, and as I mentioned, he's 100% blind, so he's made sure that everything is really really accessible and intuitive. And we have some future partnerships in line with other sort of wearables that we're hoping to be able to announce, be able to showcase in the future as well. So a lot of exciting things for people um, to look forward to. And absolutely, yeah, no, it's everything is kind of built with that in mind.
Really good. And then if you were to give, I mean, you can't really say, and I understand why you can't really say, but if you were to give a projected prediction for, well, for one thing, how will this be kind of available? Will it just be something that would be eventually just available
Yeah,
like online type of thing, or through partnership with other companies? How would people actually buy it when it's, on the market, in other words?
yeah. We view that there's going to be a few different channels actually. So one just online through our website, and then we also view that this is actually going to be available for people, at least in the United States, that get services from vocational rehab or Veterans Affairs. And we're also in the process of having um, HSA, Health Savings Account, FSA help cover it. So even being able to get it reimbursed in some capacities.
Sure, that would be especially great for blind veterans and really anybody, but especially blind veterans for sure. That would be really good for them. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Especially, and I think to some extent, and I'm sure you've heard this, that in some ways, I think this technology, it'll be meaningful for anyone, really, but more, I guess, more touching, more sentimental to a blind person who became blind older when they were older, rather than, as I said, rather than someone like me who has usable vision but was never sighted. Those are two very different groups of people, The blind people who used to be sighted and remember nonverbal, and then the blind people like me who were blind, who were raised as blind people to know that they're blind their whole life. Not that it should impact whether you sell it to one group or the other, but I do think that you're going to get a lot of different results from testing with those two different groups. I don't know. I just think, obviously I'm interested, obviously, but also I also think that you would get perhaps and I don't even want to use the word accurate because I don't think that's the right word, but perhaps you would get a more pinpointed or even precise impact if you were to use this device or test this device on a blind person who became blind later in life. I don't know. Have you correlated data about this, by the way?
A lot of people that were born blind are majority of our user base, actually, and testing
That's
base.
very interesting.
And I think it's because kind of what you alluded to. It's like, what are these visual cues? Like, when are they actually happening? And then it's just like, so along those lines, really, like everyone knows that these things exist. Like you said, like, I know that these arms crossed and waves happen, occur, but when and how and did I ever, miss out on any of them, so to speak. So we actually have a lot of people that, you know, view that as like a really, really like empowering and cool thing. And, I think, Aaron, we should just invite you to be a tester so that you can try it out yourself.
Well, by the way, I was going to say it off air, but I'll say it on the recording just to make sure it happens. I accept. Go for it. Seriously, I'm absolutely fascinated by it because I've actually never gotten to beta test and I would absolutely love to. And I would like to beta test, appropriately. In other words, I would basically like an assignment where you say, okay, we're going to let Aaron's opinion test it, but when we do, we need you to try to collect data in these types of situations so that my research
Definitely.
can actually be, can actually, how do I even express it?
Be
Can
actionable, right?
actionable so that I know that my research is helping you to actually produce the best product possible. And that's what I care about. Yeah, this is some cool stuff. And of course I have a fascination with, invention and things like that. I don't know, when you were growing up, did you come up with any crazy inventions? you know,
Yeah.
vehicles that can go to Mars or, hey, what about that lunar rover that you were going to put me up on, cause I forgot to
Yeah.
tell you, I always wanted to be an astronaut. What about that project? When are we doing that?
When we're doing that, I know, right? Like we need a single man spaceship that can just be launched to Mars. Right?
And I'll bring the haptic device to make sure that I can see millions of people's facial expressions right through
And
my
the
visual.
aliens.
And the what?
And the aliens too.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Wait a minute. Well, you gotta contact one of those alien civilizations. I don't know if you're allowed to produce this device without their approval. What if, yeah, that's true. Or even the other thing too, creatively to think about is, so could this device be used as some sort of translation tool? In other words, and I'm not talking about translating nonverbal cues, but simply translating languages haptically. Could it do that?
We think so, because one of the things that we've been playing around with, well, playing around with is maybe a strong word, but I've talked about is putting other things besides visual cues to the sense of touch that can be communicated instantly and intuitively, right? Like imagine, all the notifications on your phone. If you just knew exactly what the notification was through the sense of touch, and you didn't have to like pick it up, press it, and then hit a screen reader, you could just be like, "Oh, I just got a text from Charlene, and it says, when are you going to be ready?" And you could just communicate that through haptics. Um,
Certainly. Certainly.
that
Yeah.
that kind of cool stuff.
I mean, I already do that. I'll tell you that I'm a real audio nerd and an audio guy. So if my phone will be in my pocket, I'll be out with somebody or something, and they'll hear the notification and they'll say, don't you need to check that? And I say no, because I know what it was just based on the sound. So yes, that could definitely work, provided that the haptics were distinctive enough. That would definitely
Totally.
work. And then the haptics would, and then I would recognize a certain, a certain haptic pattern for, let's say my brother needs to send me a text or my mother, father, or like a close family member. So I do think, my brain, I guess, as not only as a podcaster, but as somebody who cares and someone who's in the market, I could see this being used with interviews, jobs, school, and then mostly with immediate family, because if
Hmm.
you're out with your friend, you know, because if you're out with the friend at the bar, not to say that those cues are not important, they're critical in social situations in public, but a blind person is maybe not going to be as attentive to those things if they're in a serious social situation in a public place that's really loud or really chaotic. So that would be a really interesting case study too. I mean, I can think of all sorts of case studies that I would be able to do, potentially do with this device. Now the results would be I don't have a clue because I've never done it. Would my would my results be of any use to you? I don't have a clue because I've never done it, but I know I'm
I think they
interested.
would.
Well, you're overly don't as I say, keep your expectations hovering around between 0 and negative 1,000. I say never be positive. I'm a pessimist at heart, really. So I would keep your expectations in life. I People ask me, they say, Aaron, why are you a pessimist? I say, well, most of my life has been pretty bad. And then if something's good, I can be really happy or really surprised. But these types of happy people, they can be fun, but they're pretty annoying actually, because if you're happy all the time, then you never know when you're supposed to be upset about anything else. That always cracks me up,
Well,
that
I
whole
think
notion. Yeah.
like in that sense, like pessimistic versus optimism, I think like the main thing, like those are the opposites, right? Optimism versus pessimism. But I think like even more than that, it's like just emotional regulation
Right.
and,
Sure.
and not feeling highs too high or feeling lows too lows, right?
Hmm.
Because then you
Sure.
kind of just live like a roller coaster of feelings. You get really affected when shit hits the fan and goes down. I
Absolutely.
don't know if cussing's allowed, but
No problem. This is explicit. Trust me. This is for adults only. These podcasts.
yeah,
You should have heard some of the other. I can't help but interject. I didn't mean to, but I know I did. My
oh, you're
my
good.
mistake in interjecting. But so have you listened to any of my other episodes? Because we've covered some really R-rated stuff on this podcast. Just to let you know.
What is your most R-rated topic that you ever had to cover?
I mean, look, man, I've talked to people who've been to prison before. I've talked to people who've been drug users. I've talked to people who've seen crimes happen. I've talked to people who've been at rock bottom. I've talked to people who've been having all sorts of weird different experiences, social experiences. I mean, I've had people, on the show who talked about, yeah, there was one. I mean, we can connect more privately in the future, obviously. But I've talked to one guy in particular. He started out. I'm not exaggerating. He started out living let me be gentle, a less than good neighborhood in a particularly less than good city in the United States. He ends up playing pro football. He ends up going to prison. He ends up becoming an engineer. He ends up becoming successful and helping people. So I've had some of those roller coaster conversations. But I think you're very right. I think that if people do regulate their emotions, I think that is probably the best thing to do. But in a similar sense, I've learned with understanding research and data, you always have to keep your expectations low, relatively low, until the data proves otherwise. So until you see the result. In other words, I have to see it to believe. And I do believe you, obviously, but I have to see it to believe,
Right.
and so do you. So it's, and that's the other thing too. Um, I
But
mean, sure.
expectations are like meant to be fluid. You should have high
Absolutely.
expectations about some things and then low expectations on others, right? One of high expectations on, the people, like for us, it's like Brian and I, we have a few other team members and engineers, and we work with each other and we talk every single day. We need to have like really high expectations with each other as a team because, you know, that's the only way that you can really move forward with having this crazy vision and idea that we're going to make every single nonverbal communication cue universally accessible in real time. super
No, I
high
agree with
expectations.
that part.
Yeah.
From a business world, what I meant was from the business world, from your perspective. No, I agree with keeping high expectations high in
Yeah.
that way. Yes, no, that's where my expectations are over the top, and I'm also overly motivated. So my
Yep.
personality type is overly motivated and a proud pessimist about the other stuff all at the same time. So, because
No,
you
I
gotta,
like it.
I'm a mix. I'm a character. I'm a full mixed bag. You don't know
Yeah.
quite what you're going to get. But no, all of this is so fixating to me. So fascinating. Um, I mean, privately, I'll tell you other people in addition to Aaron's opinion. I can certainly get you connected or certainly point you in the right direction for other people who you need to sit down with and have a long discussion with about all this because all this is good, but other people are going to be able to give other perspectives and other knowledge. Um, yeah. So now, yeah, with the beta testers in other countries that you did mention, what parts of the world are they from, and what have they been giving you back as far as their feelings about this from other countries?
Yeah. So we're going to the UK, Canada, and Hungary. And then we have some people in South Africa and Australia, but that's just going to have to be at a later date, not this November. Um, and it's actually been really, really similar, right? Like a lot of the similar sort of feedback on what information is important, what's critical. And then the thing that I like the most that we can do is from that feedback, like especially about like, say you want different cues that we currently don't have well tuned, then you can request them. And like you can be like, I request this cue. So you can say, like for instance, we did a pilot at Colorado Center for the Blind, and it's a really, really big training center and school. They have they've had, probably thousands of alumni, hundreds of people each year. And a bunch of the students were like, you need to add middle finger. And
No,
we
you
just
don't. No,
add
you
middle
don't.
finger because they asked for it. Swear. Yeah. And so like that is one of the fun things is like people from these other places and are like just like in different environments will ask for like completely different things. But our job is to listen and then try to get them added as soon as possible so they can start using it.
Cool. If you're going to add middle finger, you have to add the thumb because, as you know, in some other countries, Mediterranean, in some parts of Middle Eastern countries, the thumb is the middle finger. So it's like that's a compensation, right? So if you're going to add a middle finger for a Westerner, then you would have to add a thumb to be used in other countries where the thumb equals the middle finger. You know, so that's actually why I don't when I respond to people, well, eventually, well, pretty soon, actually, tomorrow specifically, if you are on WhatsApp, and I don't know if you are or not, but if you're a WhatsApp guy, I have a lot of people on my WhatsApp groups, and they're from all over the world. So sometimes I don't use the thumbs up because that can be the middle finger. So sometimes I'll react
Mm,
with a red heart. Yeah, you got to be really careful about that one. The thumbs up is only positive in the United States and in many other countries. Some countries, it's precisely the middle finger. So you got to be
that's a
careful
good
about it.
one.
You got to be really careful about not using
Well,
it with
hey, well, we
certain,
have
yeah.
thumbs up though, so people can get thumbs ups too.
Yes,
So,
but see but the point is the Americans, to American, we know that thumbs up is positive. But what I'm saying is if I'm communicating online with somebody from the Middle East, or a Muslim, I make sure to not use the thumb up because I know that's a symbol of negativity for them. Now,
totally.
now most Americans don't know that and make the mistake and learn the hard way. I've learned it. I not
The hard
by
way.
not the hard way. I've learned because I've traveled and I've researched a lot of social behavior from country to country, which is rapidly different. Even the simplest things can cause a lot of social problems. Nonverbal communication can be very confusing from country to country, and it's not at
Yep,
all the same. Yeah,
totally.
totally. Yeah, really,
Totally.
really, really fascinating. Yeah. So when you're not doing all this stuff, what other creative and really fascinating stuff? So how do you spend your time out there in Colorado? Now, I've been to California once, never Colorado. It seems like a beautiful place. Are you a big
Colorado's
skier?
great.
Please tell me you're a big skier. Please tell me
Yep.
you love
Yep.
skiing,
We
right?
we ski, and it's funny
Yeah.
you mentioned California because we're actually in San Diego right now for the next like month.
Oh, you are.
Yep. So we just got an investor from Techstars in partnership with San Diego State University.
Okay.
So we're working at the San Diego State University kind of as a research and sort of like investment partner so they can help us build ALEYE, scale, grow, learn, and do all that kind of good stuff. So, since we've been out here, we actually got out here in September and then we leave in December, and then be back to Colorado. It's been a lot of heads down building and learning.
Yeah.
But for fun, when I'm not doing the building and learning, um, I like to think that I'm still out there and learning, but I try to do all the kind of action stuff. Like I love skiing, dirt biking,
Oh, I
kind of
love talking
anything that
about that.
yes, anything that kind of like puts me out of my comfort zone and is a little bit out there. I'm there for it. I think the risk aspect is pretty fun, and it's a good way to spend an afternoon.
Hmm, hmm. How could your device? Here's something I like to do. It's going to sound silly. I do have enough vision to use my electric scooter, so certainly I'm not. I don't have enough vision for a dirt bike or a motorcycle as much as I wish I did, but I don't. Anyway, one activity that I find that many people actually underestimate and undervalue the value behind it is hiking. So what would happen, by the way, if you were to take um, oh, I have a really crazy question. So what if you're a blind hunter and you're trying to hunt, let's say, game, like a large game like a deer or some big animal? How would the device
We,
react to an animal's nonverbal communication
you
towards a
know,
human?
we have never
Well, let's
done
try it.
that, but I'm saying we've never done it, but we have had that request many times
Yeah.
of people saying, "Can it read how my dog or cat is feeling?" And we're like, "Not right now, but maybe in the
See,
future."
here's the thing. For a blind person, I have a dog. My
Yep.
mother wanted to adopt a dog, so we did. So we adopted this sweet little dog, this Pyrenees mix. She's absolutely lovely. She's a big character. Um, so I mean, I think if a blind person's living with a dog, the dog's nonverbal communication is kind of obvious to a blind person. That's more simplistic, more direct. They wag their tail when they're happy, and then any other moment they're happy. So basically, dogs are mostly happy,
Hmm.
except for when they get sick or old or something, and then the behavior is very overly obvious. But I've never hunted, but I have heard. I had some guy on the show years ago, months back, who did hunt as a blind person. And I just wondered, yeah, how would this device translate to doing sports, I guess, and sports and hunting and hiking and things like that? How can it help there is what I was wondering. So yeah, some testing should be done there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun one. Seeing like what can we learn about the animals that people so commonly interact with or have, or in even those more like diverse environments, like a deer or an elk or something. That would be fascinating to
Yeah, because
kind of
people
dive
do
into.
hunt. Well, or the strange thing happened to me on my walk today with my dog, and this really did happen. I was walking with my mother and the dog, and apparently, now I couldn't see it with my vision, but apparently there was a big black bird, some sort of, raptor-like bird, probably some sort of kestrel or eagle was apparently circling us, right? So, which I love birds. I absolutely love nature. So I loved it. I couldn't see it, but I loved it. So I guess would the device be able to tell that a big black bird is circling your environment, I guess? And how would it signal that, I guess?
Huh. It would depend on so the camera is actually really important here, like the camera stuff in this,
Yeah.
because the field of view and where you're looking matters, because it's supposed to emulate, vision.
Hmm.
So, if you're looking straight, but there's a bird up up in the sky, would have no idea. But if you looked up and we were able to do some image recognition, then we could totally tell you that there was a bird, like a
So I
thousand
guess if
percent.
I pointed my wrist in the direction that my mother told me the bird was, then maybe the device would pick it up and perceive animal flying in the sky.
Well, it would be where your head was pointed
Okay.
because right now it would be where the camera is seeing things.
Hmm.
So it would actually depend on where your head is pointed. So you don't have to point your wrist anywhere. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Oh, no worries.
Um,
Yeah.
it's all in the glasses that you would put on or right for like or like a clip on for the camera. So we have kind of optionality there where you can put a clip on a camera on your glasses and then you can look around and see.
Right. But in other words, do you have to have the hardware on the glasses the whole time when you wear the device, or how does it work?
Yeah, you would need the camera because the camera is what's going to be taking in the visual input of what people are doing.
Hmm.
So right now we have glasses, a camera and glasses. But we're hoping and soon we'll be integrating into other sort of like glasses platforms too.
Yeah. Yeah, this is some cool stuff. This is really, really mysterious and really clear, overly clear, but also oddly mysterious and perfectly clear all at the same time. It's really beautiful. Yeah. All right.
Well, hey, I appreciate you asking all these questions. This has been fun.
Well, the reason why I do it is because I care. I not only do I love having, active learning conversations. Most of our conversations here on Aaron's Opinion, I mean, they're all about active learning. It's just usually I ask other people with disabilities to talk more about their life journey and social stuff. And this is more about breaking down the building blocks of engineering and more of a hardware conversation. So this is actually a very different flavor and I love it. But what I wanted to do as we start to walk towards the end, though, certainly is give you the chance, Jack, to ask me all the questions you need to know and want to know about Aaron Richmond and Aaron's opinion in my life. And as I always say, really get under my skin. Ask me the questions to really make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster. What do you really want to know? Ask all your questions.
Yeah, Aaron, I want to know
Hmm.
what is the okay, let's start with something maybe in the past.
Sure.
So, you said you got your degree in international affairs.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about what that means and why you chose international affairs. Well, like there's billions of tons of different things you could choose. International affairs. What got you motivated to do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I, from a very young age, was always exceptionally fascinated by politics and current affairs. And my whole life has been surrounded by media and audio content. So I was listening to talk radio before I could talk. My parents had to drive back and forth from a hospital when I lived somewhere else, not where I am now. But anyway, my whole life has been saturated with audio. So that's one thing you're going to learn about me. I'm an audio guy. I'm an audio learner. I'm really affected by sound. That's a really important thing for you to know, which is, of course, why this is all being recorded so that you can go back to this episode as much as you need and listen. So international relations is what you would study to learn about, basically why, war happens, why peace happens, and how countries and states interact in the system. And it's basically a course of classes where you take an enormous amount of classes with reading about, politics, history, economics, that type of thing. You're supposed to be able to transition that and work in the public sector, but primarily because of the tremendous issues that the blind have in obtaining employment, it became very difficult for me to work in the public. And then over time, I got a job. Actually, so my job and the way that I function within my job is I am a teacher of English as a second language online. So I'm able to do that. And that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years of my life. So now I'm 34 years old. So that's kind of my background and how I got to this point. Yeah. Yeah, I think I answered your question. Yeah. Hmm.
No, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So, what are your thoughts on some of the current, regulations going on? Like what are your opinions on, I feel like things are changing so quickly, especially in and around employment. What are your insights on how to get people in the disability community in general um, to gain employment? Because, like you said, it is the number one priority for
It
these a
is.
lot of these advocacy organizations.
So, so it's important, I think, for you as a sighted person, and for me as a blind person, it's important for me to tell you as a sighted person that each advocacy organization, although many of them are similar, they are all a little bit different. So that's a very subtle thing that's important for you to keep in the back of your mind, right? Each advocacy organization has a different mission. That's another important thing. The other critically important thing for blind people is being employed. Now, I will tell you that and anybody can tell you that blind people have obviously faced significant discrimination within the job force, right? Considering that apparently to be very conservative about it, supposedly 70% of blind people are either underemployed or simply unemployed. I'm going to speak from my heart to yours, Jack. I think about 90% of the blind people in the United States are unemployed. Okay.
Mhm.
So, really, when you think about it all, when you think about it all in that, in that context, right? Blind people are going to care a lot more about succeeding in the interview than the device that you'll give them to put on their wrist. And I'm not saying that to say that the device is not going to be special. It will be. But I am saying that blind people are not going to care about the tools. They're going to care about the product, right? They're going to say, well, was I able to understand the interview enough socially to actually get the job? So the blind person's not going to care about the device. They're going to care about the job, So that's a huge thing. So blind people have to be ready. And also the other end of that string is that the sighted employers need to be willing to take risks. And a lot of blind people, and the more you talk to Brian, although I don't know the guy, he's a great guy, I'm sure he is, but I don't know him. But if you do talk to Brian and other blind people, they'll tell you that employers seem to find it very difficult to hire blind people who do not have work experience, right? This is another subtle thing. Employers hate taking risks, and they need to start taking risks, right? Doing what you do. Use your imagination, invent stuff. Step out of the comfort zone, doing what you do. So if more people were you, if we had more Jack Walters, right, then we'd have more employment. But unfortunately, most people like you and I are not really active thinkers as much and are not really ready to get out of our skin and to get out of our comfort zone. So that's, for me, that's my answer. And that's kind of what it's about for me. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. That was a very well understood answer to that question. That makes so much sense. And I think that is like what it comes down to is like
I'm glad it
people
makes
need to
sense
take
to
risks.
you. Yeah. I'm glad
Yeah,
it
it
makes sense
does.
to you. But the other thing is you would have to translate this knowledge to people who don't understand. And that's another
Right.
subtle thing. So
Right.
good. I'm glad you understand me. Great. Make thousands of other people understand you. Fine.
You're right.
Good luck.
No,
You
but
have your work cut out
I
for
mean,
you.
that could be part of like what we're doing in our marketing though, is
Yeah,
like we don't
totally.
just have like, I mean, we have, 700 or 800 followers on LinkedIn. Um, that's a lot of those are a lot of business people, right? Like a lot of the people that follow us on LinkedIn aren't just, people in the community, but it's other business folks.
Hmm.
And, one of the things that we could be doing, and I think we do an okay job with this, but we could do a better one, is the benefits that you actually gain from having someone blind in the workforce, because there are measurable benefits as well. Like there's a risk, but you can actually say that there's actually quite a few benefits when it comes to understanding, and there's already proof that diverse teams outperform modular or, similar teams. Like diverse backgrounds, diverse people
Of course.
create way better outcomes in the business setting than if you have a bunch of, just say,
Homogeneous.
Chads in the
Yeah.
room.
You get it because you're a
Totally.
sighted person who hires people because you would hire people with disabilities because you get it. But my point, not to harp it, but to make sure you understand, most people are not willing to take risks. So risk analysis and risk taking is a huge thing. Yeah.
Totally. You gotta take risks. You gotta love taking risks.
Yeah, absolutely you do. And we do, I do. We all need to take the right risks in life, obviously. And this is, these
Absolutely.
these types of things are the right things. Well, what else do you want to know?
You know, I think we hit the bases, man. Aaron, this
Okay.
was this was a pleasure.
Well, I really
We hit the groove table, man.
thoroughly enjoyed it. Absolutely. All right. Well, certainly don't hang up because we're actually going to produce the reel, and you're gonna like this one in just a second. I'm going to turn off the recorder, and I'm going to turn it back on for just a second.
Okay.
So, if someone who's not Aaron's opinion, if you're listening to this episode from other countries and you want to get in touch with Jack Walters, you want to be a beta tester, how can you be reached? How can they get involved?
Yeah, they can reach out going to hapware.com/waitlist. Just go to our website, hapware.com, and then join our waitlist. And you can also email us at info@hapware. That's the best way to get involved. Say that Aaron sent you, and we'll get you on the list.
All right. All right, everybody. All right. Well, very good. Okay, Jack Walters, I wish you and your company, the only thing I wish is success and more motivation and more risks and more success. Absolutely. All
Yep.
right,
We'll have
everybody.
to have a
Thank you
part
for
two soon.
listening. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening, everybody. And of course, until next time, everybody be well out there, keep podcasting. And until next time, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.